And so the 1270 had more of a almost like a collegiate type of crowd that was there. And then one time when I walked into the 1270, I noticed that the music was coming from the back room of the first floor. Okay, and I went back there, and this was my first introduction to Jimmy Stuart. Okay, and Jimmy Stuart, they had in that room, there was like a bar, and then in the back there was like an organ on a pedestal, some sort of small pedestal type of thing. There was a piano there because of the piano bar. And Jimmy was playing on top of the organ. The two turntables were set up there. There was one speaker. The one speaker was above the doorway as you walked in, pointing toward like Jimmy, etc. And from that moment, there was energy created by the music and by Jimmy that was unmatched.
And very different from a jukebox, obviously.
Oh, yeah, obviously. But a lot of the same songs.
Right.
A lot of those same songs, only mixed
right.
and blended, etc.
Right.
And those were the days of the Philly sound. Love is the Message, TSOP, Patty Joe, Make Me Believe in You, things like that. And it was crazy, we were absolutely out of our minds, okay, over the music and dancing to that music,
And this was probably about 73, 74, you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking somewhere around there at that point we're getting toward.
So concurrently in places like New York, the loft was sort of happening, so like
Probably.
It was starting to get more developed as a DJ culture was starting to just starting to get developed.
Just starting, I mean, at this point, Dana Jacovitis was playing in the A House down in Provincetown at the time. And it was Jimmy Stuart that had hooked into what Dana was doing. Okay. And he wanted to do that same thing. I don't know if you know this, but Jimmy Stuart graduated from MIT as a chemical engineering major.
I did not know that.
Yes.
And Stuart, his last name is spelled Stuard.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct.
And he's no longer with us. He
passed away in the fire at the Everard Baths.
Right.
77, May of 77.
Okay.
So Jimmy, took what Dana was doing and, brought it to the 1270. And again, going back to the jukebox just for a second, Love's Theme by Barry White and Love Unlimited Orchestra was on that jukebox, okay? And shortly after that, and shortly after, Jimmy was playing there, the record companies realized that something's going on that they didn't know about, okay? Because I believe, I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure that the story is correct, that Love Unlimited went gold without any major radio play, and they wanted to know why.
Right.
And the reason is because people were hearing this in the clubs and buying the records, Soon I hooked into where they were getting these records, and it was Skippy White's.
Skippy White's,
down on Mass Ave and Columbus or Tremont, I forget. Could be further down even. Could be Shawmut, I don't know. But every Saturday morning, the DJs would show up there and, get the latest and start listening to things, etc.
What was the format then? Was it still 45s?
Oh, yes.
With the big hole?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, 45s, definitely. 45s and albums.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not talking at 12 inches yet.
Right.
Okay, for them. So they had to hunt things out. Okay, I was not part of this. I used to go to Skippy White's to buy the records that I heard. I wasn't a DJ yet.
Right.
Okay. But those early years, besides what they would find in places like Skippy White's, then they started going to the actual record companies located in Boston, Atlantic and a few others, and go to their doorstep and say, what do you have that's coming out that's, R&B type of related, music? and they would grab that and run with it if it was, something that they would play. So they had to search for records. This is before there was a record pool where the record companies all sent all of their records to the record pool, and they just distribute them, and everyone had the same thing. So it created a very, very interesting thing because, someone would have something that the other person doesn't have, and then there would be this exchange, and did you hear this? Did you hear that? And there will always be a certain amount of competition between DJs, but there is also an awful lot of camaraderie as well.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that a little more in a bit, because I find that interesting, because I know Val, for example, is a proponent of sharing as much as possible, but there are other DJs who sort of have this feeling that they want to keep certain things to themselves because it gives them a leg up, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a great story about Val as far as sharing and not sharing, and we've talked about this several times, so I don't mind talking about it. He was, to my knowledge, the first person that had a copy of Gil Scott-Heron's In the Bottle. Okay, and he was playing a cabaret at the time. Now we're jumping ahead, but I'll go back. But anyway, he ripped the label off of the record so that no one would know what it was, so that he had the other copy. Okay, and when we reconnected on Facebook, I said, there's an old urban legend I need to clear up with you. And I said, is it true, that this actually happened? And he was like, could be, I'm not sure, And then maybe a year or so later, he wrote to me, he says, I came across my copy of In the Bottle, the label is off of it.
So it was true. It was true.
Yes, I think so.
And this is Val, for people who don't know, this is Val and Valario. And his last name, how do you pronounce his last name? Do you know?
Bernasconi.
Bernasconi, okay.
I believe that's correct spelling. Forgive me, Val.
He's somebody who's going to come in and talk to us as soon as he can as well. Sure.
Yeah, Val goes back to the early days as well.
So Dana and I was doing Provincetown. Jimmy picked up what he was doing, brought it to 1270.
Correct.
And they were going to Skippy White to get the music, but there were no pools yet.
Correct.
And so where did that start to change?
That happens much later, okay, because then the next thing that sort of happened, first of all, I just want to say that Jimmy was mixing records in a manner that was much tighter, much more, it wasn't sort of like just segueing from one record to another. He was mixing records. And I will never forget, I know where I was standing, etc., dancing, and he kept going back and forth between MFSB's Love is the Message and TSOP. And when I tell you, that crowd, I think I remember looking and seeing the lights, shaking on the walls from the screams and everything else that was happening, the energy that was in that back room.
Because he was extending it, basically.
Yes. And, at that point we knew what the song sounded like, etc. So it's like he's doing something else, it's like going back and forth. Oh, we just added that song,
Right.
So there was an energy level back then that I would say has been unmatched, since then.
Do you think part of the reason for that is just because of the sheer newness of it?
Yes.
I mean, because people knew the music.
It was new. Also, the other thing, too, you need to remember that we were coming out of the Vietnam War, etc., and being down in the dumps, etc., about that. And gay people were coming out. This is after Stonewall. And we were getting more comfortable about going out public. And, there was a time, in Sporters, people used to, hide their faces as they were walking into Sporters. We just walked into the 1270, we were fine. And, or at least we thought we were. The music, there were silly songs. Some of the silly songs were wonderful songs. But I think those silly songs were the ones that people enjoyed so much because it was just like carefree and fun and just enjoying it. I'll Bake Me a Man, Stop, I Don't Need No Sympathy, Oh No, Not the Beast Day. Songs like that are just, songs that were just fun to dance to. I mean, Discotheques and the Sextolettes. When that first came out with Get Dancing, that was the first time I heard the word disco. as a single word as opposed to discotheque or
Right.
something like that. That was the first time I recall hearing the word disco. But that was still when we were downstairs, okay? Then they decided that Jimmy needed to go upstairs because this was getting too big,
Right.
okay? And they had to make a booth up there. Now, upstairs is just a big, huge rectangle.
Yeah.
So they broke a hole in the wall, okay, and created a booth that was actually outside the building, okay?
Yeah, and that you can still see that from the outside of the building, right?
Guess
you
what?
can still see that.
It's gone.
Oh, it is gone.
Yes.
I haven't looked for it in a while for it.
Last week I was driving down the street, and every time I do, I look up at that booth, you know, and just think.
And you used to see it jutting out in the back.
Yes, and it's gone now.
Okay.
Because the building next door.
All right.
Okay, and as a result, I was like,
That's true.
you know, I meant to write to Wendy and saying, the booth's gone. You know, that little alcove or what it was.
And later it moved over to the other side of the room.
Then it moved to the other side. It was much, much bigger.
Right.
I mean, the booth at the time, when Jimmy was in it, there was enough room for 2 people, okay? And by 2 people, Jimmy was here sitting on his little chair and, you know, blending records, and you were here sitting on the floor, okay, because you had to crawl onto the table and get out through the doorway underneath.
Right.
And he had, you know, maybe 3 bins, all 3 bins of records behind him. Okay. It was
and what kind of turntables was he using then? Do you remember what they would have been?
They were definitely not, they were standard turntables. They're standard radio turntables, probably Resco Studio Pros or something to that effect. They were not variable speeds.
Right.
They were not variable speed control machine. Turntables.
Yeah.
And this is when Jimmy really just kind of like took off. The sound system and everything was done by Lew Feldman, who was very, very important to us and to the DJs. And he did many of the sound systems.
And is he with us anymore? Do you know?
No,
Okay.
he's gone.
Okay. So
Miss Lew.
Miss Lew.
Yeah.
So now, so they invested in the sound system.
Yeah.
And how was he mixing? What was he using for a mixer per se to go between records?
Lew had rigged something as far as the volume and everything.
Because there was no standard knob mixers.
There was
or
no
anything.
real mixers back then.
Right.
You know, Lew was the genius of the day. You know, that took care of all of that.
Right.
And but interestingly enough, you know, there were those records that you just wanted to just slow down just a hair or something, and Jimmy grabbed a hold of a rocks glass. Okay, now I don't know if it came from the 1270 or not. Okay, but it was a rocks glass that some clubs used to use, where the bottom of it went further up than it really should, in order to cheapen you for the drink a little bit.
Right.
Okay, but because of that, it fit over the spindle.
Right.
Okay, and he would fill it with batteries.
And that would slow the record down.
To slow the turntable down a hair.
Yeah.
You know, just enough for him to do what he needed to do.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
exactly. And I don't think there's a DJ around at that time that didn't see that and go, whoa.
Right.
There's an idea, and then we all look.
So he was a real pioneer in terms of even conceptually just slowing records down.
Yes, yes. Oh, and then, you know, over the years, you know, he was like, oh, what I could do with a variable speed turntable, you know. But we didn't get to that, you know, for a while. And I don't think, let's see, it was maybe late in his tenure at the 1270 that Lew finally figured out something to do, something for, you know, to create variable speed turntables.